All right, let's get right to it. You spend all that money on a fancy sonar, the best lures, the warmest gear, but the biggest fish spooking culprit is sitting right on the ice next to you, and it's completely free. Today, we are talking about shadows. But not your shadow. We've all been beaten over the head with that one. No, we're talking about the shadow of your gear. In this video, I'm going to show you the one thing that most ice fishermen, from beginners to seasoned veterans, completely overlook, and how it can kill a hot bite in an instant. Have you ever been marking fish, everything is going great, and then, poof, they vanish? The reason might have been right next to your bucket the whole time. So tell me, do you really think a rod's shadow is a bigger deal than a person's? Let's get into it. For generations, the golden rule of ice fishing has been drilled into our heads. Don't stand over the hole, and don't let your shadow cross the hole. It comes from a good place. The old-timers knew that a sudden change in light or a big moving shape overhead can make fish skittish, especially in clear, shallow water. So we all learned to creep up to our holes, to kneel off to the side, to be as stealthy as a fox. We get so hyper-focused on our own bodies and our own movements that we go into autopilot with everything else. We drill a hole, kick the slush away, and immediately set down our skimmer, our rod, our bait bucket, all within easy reach. We do it without thinking. But what we fail to realize is that in our effort to be invisible, we're surrounding our fishing spot with an army of threatening shapes that are screaming danger to everything swimming below. First, let's talk basic physics. The ice above a fish is its sky. Light filters down through it, creating the ambient brightness of their world. On a clear, sunny day, this light is direct and strong. When an object is placed on the ice, it blocks that light, creating a defined, high-contrast shadow on the underside of the ice. Think about it from our perspective. If a massive, dark object suddenly blotted out the sun, you'd notice, and you'd probably be concerned. For a fish, it's the exact same principle. A shadow isn't just a patch of darkness. It's an abrupt and unnatural interruption in their normal environment. The clearer the ice and the brighter the sun, the more pronounced and terrifying this effect becomes. We need to start thinking less like fishermen on top of the ice and more like the prey animals living underneath it, constantly scanning their sky for threats. So let's take a fish's eye view. Imagine you're a big, wary perch suspended 10 feet below the surface. Your entire world is illuminated from above by this glowing white ceiling. You're looking for tiny water fleas or maybe a minnow. Your eyes are adapted to spot movement and contrast. Suddenly, a section of your ceiling goes dark. It's not a gradual dimming like when a cloud passes over. It's a sharp, defined shape. It doesn't look like anything natural that belongs there. This is what the shadow of your gear looks like from their world. It's an alien intrusion. Predators in the wild, whether it's an osprey, an eagle, or an otter, almost always attack from above. That instinct to fear things overhead is hardwired into a fish's DNA over millions of years. Your bucket's shadow might as well be a killer bird to them. Let's expand on that idea of the predator from above. To a fish, a sudden dark shape in their ceiling is a universal signal for danger. It triggers an immediate fight or flight response. In most cases, it's flight. They don't stick around to investigate whether that dark shape is the shadow of a bald eagle or your discarded ice scoop. Their survival depends on reacting first and asking questions later. This is especially true for larger, older fish, the very ones we're trying to catch. They didn't get big by being reckless. They got big by recognizing potential threats and avoiding them. So when you plop your gear down and cast a new sharp shadow over their feeding zone, you're essentially sending out a massive warning signal that tells every smart fish in the area to evacuate immediately. You're undoing all your stealthy work before you even bait your hook. Now let's compare your body to your gear. You are consciously being careful. You kneel down. You try to stay out of the direct line of sight. You limit your movement. You are a smart object, actively trying to minimize your impact. Your gear, on the other hand, is dumb. You toss your skimmer down without a second thought. You lay your spare rod on the ice. You set your tackle box right there for convenience. These objects are stationary, yes, but their shadows are stark, unmoving, and unnatural. A fish might tolerate a fleeting shadow from you as you check the hole, but a constant black shape that wasn't there 5 minutes ago? That's different. That's a permanent change to their environment, and it signals that something is wrong. The real culprit isn't the brief moment you peer into the hole. It's the gear that sits there for hours, silently scaring fish away. Of all your gear, your fishing rod is probably the worst offender. Think about its shape. It's long and thin. When you lay a rod down on the ice on a sunny day, it doesn't create a blob-like shadow. It casts a long, sharp, perfectly straight line. There is absolutely nothing in nature that creates a shadow like that on the underside of the ice. It's the visual equivalent of a loud, unnatural noise. Imagine you're in a quiet forest, and you suddenly hear a perfect, piercing electronic beep. It would put you on high alert. That's what a rod shadow is to a fish. It's an unnatural line that cuts across their field of view, signaling that something man-made and potentially dangerous is nearby. And where do we usually lay our rods? Right next to the hole, pointing towards it. We're essentially drawing a giant dark arrow that screams, "Danger here." It gets even worse when that rod shadow starts to move. When you're jigging, even with the most subtle movements of your wrist, the rod tip is bouncing. What do you think its shadow is doing on the underside of the ice? It's dancing, it's twitching, it's making small, erratic movements. From below, this isn't just a stationary threat anymore. It's an active one. A twitching shadow could be interpreted as the fin of a predator getting ready to strike or some other form of immediate danger. A wary walleye or a finicky crappie that might have tolerated a static shadow will bolt at the first sign of that shadow moving. You think you're imparting life into your lure, but you're actually imparting a terrifying, lifelike movement to the shadow of the tool you're using. You're scaring them off with one hand while trying to attract them with the other. Let's talk about the humble 5-gallon bucket. It's the ice fisherman's throne, storage unit, and fish carrier all in one. It's also a portable black hole. We instinctively place it right next to our hole for a convenient seat. On a sunny day, that bucket casts a massive, perfectly round, solid black shadow. It's like a localized eclipse. You've just turned the vibrant, illuminated area around your lure into a dark, ominous cavern. Fish that were cruising through the area will now see this giant zone of darkness and steer clear of it. They won't swim into the blackness to find your bait. Why would they? It looks like the mouth of a cave where a predator could be hiding. You've effectively created a no-fish zone right where you want to fish the most. Your comfortable seat is costing you bites, and you don't even realize it. The tip-up is another classic trap we set for ourselves. For maximum efficiency, we're taught to set the tip-up mechanism directly over the hole. It makes perfect sense from our perspective. But from the fish's perspective, it's a nightmare. The entire apparatus, the base, the spool, the trigger, the flag, creates a complex and unnatural shadow. It's a constant, lingering shape that sits there for hours. It's not a fleeting shadow. It's a permanent fixture of their sky for as long as you're fishing there. Fish might get used to it over time, but any new fish moving into the area will see it as a red flag. This is often why the soak time on tip-ups can be so long. It might not be that the fish aren't hungry. It's that they have to build up the courage to swim under that weird, scary shape to get to your bait. And then there's the sled, your portable base camp. It's full of all your gear, and after a long drag across the ice, the first thing you want to do is park it right next to where you're going to fish. Congratulations, you've just caused a total blackout. A fully loaded gear sled can cast a shadow that's 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. You've essentially parked a car over your fishing spot. This creates such a massive area of darkness that it changes the entire dynamic below. It will absolutely push fish out of the area. They won't just avoid the shadow, they'll leave the vicinity entirely. You could have the best spot on the lake, but if you've blanketed it in darkness with your sled, you might as well be fishing in a bathtub. The convenience of having your gear close is completely negated by the fact that you've scared away your quarry. Don't forget about your auger. After you've drilled your holes, what's the first thing you do? You lay the auger down on the ice to get it out of the way. But just like a fishing rod, an auger casts a long, thin, unnatural shadow. If the power head is on the ice, it creates an additional large, dark blob. This shadow can easily stretch 10 or 15 feet, potentially crossing over not just one, but multiple holes you've just drilled. You're contaminating your fishing area with yet another threatening shape. It's a simple act of habit: drill, drop, fish. But that middle step, drop, needs to be re-evaluated. Every single item you place on the ice has the potential to be a fish-repellent beacon. And the auger is one of the biggest and longest offenders in your entire arsenal. The impact of these shadows is massively amplified by the weather conditions. Let's compare a bright sunny day to a heavily overcast day. On a cloudy day, the light is diffused. It comes from all directions. Shadows are soft, faint, or non-existent. On these days, you can get away with being a lot sloppier with your gear placement. The fish's sky is a uniform grayish-white, and your gear doesn't create those high-contrast, scary shapes. But on a bluebird day with a brilliant sun, it's a completely different ballgame. The light is direct and harsh. Every object casts a deep, dark, well-defined shadow. This is when shadow discipline is most critical. The contrast between the bright ice and the black shadow is at its peak, making the threat appear much more real and immediate to the fish below. Now, some guys will say, but there's a foot of snow on the ice. It doesn't matter. That's a dangerous illusion. While a thick layer of snow is an excellent light diffuser and certainly helps reduce the sharpness of shadows, it does not eliminate them. Think of it like a lampshade. You can't see the bright filament of the bulb, but if you put your hand on the outside of the shade, it still creates a dark spot. A dark object, like a sled or a bucket placed on top of the snow, still blocks a significant amount of light from passing through. Below the ice, this registers not as a sharp-edged shadow, but as a large, distinct area of dimming. It's a more subtle effect, but for a wary fish, any unnatural and stationary dark patch in their ceiling is a reason to be cautious. Snow helps, but it is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Let me give you a real-life example that hammered this home for me. A couple seasons ago, I was on a hot perch bite in about 12 feet of water. It was a bright, sunny morning. I was pulling them out one after another. Then, my buddy came over to see the action. He walked up, laid his Vexilar and a spare rod down on the ice about 5 feet from my hole, and sat down to chat. Within 60 seconds, the bite completely died. My sonar, which had been lit up like a Christmas tree, was blank. We waited. Nothing. After about 5 minutes of frustration, I happened to notice that the shadow from his spare rod was cutting directly across my hole. I asked him to move it. He picked it up, walked 10 feet away, and laid it down again. I swear to you, not 30 seconds later, a school of perch moved back in and I hooked up. It was too immediate to be a coincidence. We've talked about sudden shadows, but there's also the creep factor to consider. The sun isn't stationary in the sky. As the day progresses, the angle of the sun changes, and so do the length and position of all the shadows on the ice. You might set up your sled in what you think is a safe spot in the morning, but by midday, as the sun gets higher, that shadow has shrunk and moved. By the afternoon, as the sun gets lower, that same shadow has stretched out in the opposite direction and might now be creeping directly over the hole you're fishing. A shadow that slowly but surely encroaches on a fish's territory can be just as unsettling as a sudden one. This is why you can't just set it and forget it. You have to maintain situational awareness of the sun and your shadows throughout the entire day. Fishermen are often obsessed with sound. We use quiet augers, we try not to stomp our feet, we whisper to our buddies. And while minimizing noise is important, especially on clear, thin ice, I'd argue that in many situations, this visual threat is a far greater concern. A fish can't always pinpoint the exact location of a sound, but it can see with absolute certainty where that dark, scary shape is. Sound travels and dissipates. A shadow is a constant, localized threat. For fish in water less than, say, 20 feet deep, what they see above them is often more impactful than what they hear. We spend so much time and energy trying to be quiet, when we should be spending just as much time and energy trying to be visually invisible to the fish. So, what's the solution? It starts with establishing a safe zone. This is a non-negotiable rule. Before you even think about fishing, you need to mentally draw a circle around your hole. In clear water on a sunny day, this circle should have a radius of at least 10 feet. Nothing, and I mean nothing, gets placed inside this circle. No buckets, no rods, no tackle boxes, no ice scoops. This is sacred ground. The only thing that should be near the hole is you and the one rod you are actively fishing with. This simple discipline of creating a gear-free buffer zone around your fishing area will fundamentally reduce the visual pressure you're putting on the fish. It forces you to be more deliberate and less lazy in your setup. The second part of the solution is intelligent gear placement. This means you have to think like the sun. The moment you get to your spot, The first thing you should do is identify where the sun is and figure out which way the shadows are being cast. All of your gear, your sled, your shelter, your auger, your buckets, should be placed on the side of your safe zone so that their shadows are cast away from your fishing holes, not towards them. If the sun is in the south, you place your gear camp to the north of where you're fishing. This way, the long afternoon shadows will stretch out into unproductive water behind you, leaving the water you're fishing clean and brightly lit from the fish's perspective. It's a simple game of angles that most anglers never bother to play. This brings us to the true purpose of a good rod holder. Most people think a rod holder is just a convenient tool to keep your reel out of the slush or to hold a dead stick. But its most important function in this context is to change your rod's shadow profile. By getting your rod up off the ice and standing it vertically, you dramatically reduce its shadow. Instead of a long, terrifying line stretching across the ice, you get a much smaller, more compact shadow near the base of the holder. It's still a shadow, but it's far less obtrusive and unnatural than a rod lying flat on the ice. Using a rod holder isn't about being lazy, it's about being smart and stealthy. It's a critical piece of equipment for minimizing your visual footprint. So, after all this, let's go back and debunk the original myth a little. Can you stand directly over the hole? The answer is, for a moment, yes. The act of quickly looking down your hole to check your lure or see a fish on the sonar is not the problem. That's a fleeting shadow that moves away. Fish are used to things like birds flying overhead. The real, persistent damage comes from the static, unnatural, and lingering shadows cast by your equipment. It's the rod that lays there for an hour. It's the bucket you sit on all afternoon. These are the things that create a permanent danger zone that fish learn to avoid. The old wisdom wasn't wrong, it was just incomplete. It focused on the fisherman and completely ignored all his stuff. Let's put it all together into a new setup routine, a mental checklist you should run through every single time you get on the ice. 1. Arrive at your spot and immediately check the sun's position and the direction of the shadows. 2. Drill your holes. 3. Use your skimmer to clear the slush, and then place the skimmer well outside your fishing area. 4. Establish your gear camp, your sled, your shelter, your extra gear, on the side of your holes that cast shadows away from them. 5. The only things allowed near your holes are you and the rod you're actively using, preferably in a rod holder. If you can turn this process into an unbreakable habit, you will, without a doubt, spook fewer fish and get more bites. It's not about new lures or fancy electronics. It's about basic woodsmanship on the ice. So the big takeaway is this. For years we've been obsessively tiptoeing around our holes, terrified of our own shadow, while our gear has been broadcasting a non-stop predator alert to every fish below. The most stunning, what a plot twist moment for me, was realizing that the sun, the very thing that gives us a beautiful day on the ice, is an accomplice in our failure if we don't respect its power. Learning to manage the shadows cast by your gear is just as important as choosing the right lure or finding the right depth. It's a fundamental skill we've largely ignored. This simple shift in perspective, from worrying about yourself to worrying about your equipment's footprint, could honestly be the single biggest change you make to your approach this season. Thank you so much for watching. If this video made you look at your ice fishing setup a little differently, do me a favor and hit that like button. And make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell on, because we've got a lot more myths to bust. Now I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments, is this something you've always known, or is this a new idea for you? Have you ever had a similar experience where moving a piece of gear suddenly turned the bite on? Or do you think this is all overblown and makes no difference at all? Let's get a real discussion going.